You would think, having had played both games of the Last of Us series, that the tense moments and moments of extreme terror that occur in this would not affect me in the way that they do. But boy, they are effective. I'll give you my thoughts and reactions to the latest episode of Last of Us called Infected right after the jump. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. Second episode of Last of Us is here. They're doing some magical work here. This episode, while the first episode I think sort of laid the groundwork, but we didn't really get to see the world that we all kind of know and love. Last of Us game. We see a lot more of that here. The beginning of their journey sort of occurs here. What's interesting about Last of Us, it is about a 18 plus hour game that when you get to the story beats can be truncated down quite a bit, and funneled and filtered to what it actually is. Because a lot of the times for the game, they're sending hordes of clickers and infected towards you that make the game just a little bit longer. But if you remove those, and I think for a script purpose, they don't. The action beats are not as heavy. When they put a clicker or an infected on screen, it is done for the purpose of the story, as opposed to just being an action beat where we're like, well, got to get to this room, clear this room, clear this room, and move on and move on. So therefore, a lot of the attacks that you would normally have in the game are gone, and now we're just getting to the bare bones of the story. Uh, in doing so, a lot of the moments when you finally do put a clicker on screen or you do put it infected on screen, it has a little bit more weight, a little bit more gravitas, a little bit more tension than it normally would in the game. Because after a while in the game, you're like, yeah, I've seen a bunch of these. I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do that. Here, first time you see them, you're like, oh crap, this isn't as routine as it would be in those scenarios. And so it just feels like almost a treat. But if you had cotton candy every single day, doesn't really mean as much. But if you get it for that first time after having it, not having it for a couple of years, that's sort of what we're building up here with this series. So, like with the first episode, we get a new scene that sort of builds the world that existed before the events that take place in this game and in this series. So a lot of times with video games, you're playing it as a first person. So, like with Resident Evil, Bioshock, a lot of the information that you get is through passages in a journal or a book or audio tapes you find, and it's usually kind of about the people that are in the area that you're sort of searching for. Same thing is happening with Last of Us. So in this opener, you get stuff that the game did not have because there's no way that Joel and Ellie were available or around, especially Ellie was not around to know this information. So we're getting it as an overview before we go into the world that we all know and love. So we begin with Ibu Ratna, who is a well-renowned professor of mycology in Indonesia. She's in Indonesia in 2003, kind of right before all hell breaks loose in this world. She's just eating her lunch, chilling, and then the military police come to find her and bring her back to a facility where some things have gone down that the world itself is not aware of, but they can let her kind of in on it because she might be able to fix what's happening. When she gets there, they inform her they have a woman who's laid out on a slab. She's dead and naked, being basically an autopsy is being performed on her. She does some checking in on her and seeing what's going on. She sees that there's a bite, some fungus around it, and she opens up her mouth and sees that there is fungus coming out of her mouth, and she freaks the hell out. And then we see a scene of her nervously drinking some tea and kind of having a conversation with him, like, well, where did you find her? And we come to this thing where she was what seemed to be a normal woman, was at a grain store, uh, and then she wasn't so normal. She attacked about three people, and then the police came. They locked her in a room. The police came, detained her, tried to talk to her, wasn't having it. They shot her in the head. And then the other three were taken off to different facilities, tested, and then they started freaking out. So you could see it started expanding. She's asking questions like, "Who? Well, who bit her?" And they're like, "Well, we're trying to figure that out." And it's like, And her brain's like, well, we don't have a containment on this. So my solution, because like they're asking her for what she was like, what medicine, what vaccine, what could she come up with? And there she's like, nah, none of that ain't gonna work. I ain't got none of that. We don't have time for that, nor will any of that actually get the job done. You need to bomb this place, bomb this city. They're like, what? And she's like, nope, need to bomb it. And take me home now so I can go be with my family when we do this. Because there is nothing else that can contain this besides putting a big nuke through the middle of the ground. Well, damn. We then pick up with our trio, Joel, Ellie, and Tess. Ellie is sort of waking up after a nap, after getting put through the QZ and back out to the main world, where they're going to go on this road trip to go find the Fireflies. But Joel and Tess are like standing watch just to make sure she doesn't turn or anything. And she's like, I'm not going to turn. I've been this way for a while, but they're just trying to get the lay of the land. And they're filling each other out. They don't quite understand what the situation is yet. Tess keeps wondering why Ellie is so important to the Fireflies and what has been promised and why she's been kept there. Joel is very much like, hey, yo, she's infected. I ain't got no part. I ain't got no time for this. Let's take her back now. And Tess saying, hey, if you take her back, she's going to die. And Joel is very cavalier, like, well, they'll do it, not us. So I'm not going to be the one. Better them than us. But Tess is like, well, this is our option. Look, let's get this. She's our best option to get what it is that we need. I think we should just follow through and see what we can and get this done. And Joe and Tess sort of start trying to figure out more information. Like, well, I understand that we want to get you here. Why is it so important? And eventually Ellie comes out and says that I've been told that the Fireflies are coming up with a cure and that using me can help create and facilitate that. And Joel was like, I've heard this BS before. Is this what we're really doing? This is a bunch of bull. Let's just take her back. And Tess is like, well, if they want to believe this unicorn story, fine, whatever. But they're going to give us stuff to do so. So let's go ahead and push on. So they do. And they started going through some very familiar territories to folks who play in the game. They open up that door, and you just look at the world, and you're like, "Yep, I've been here before." For those of you who play the game, you're like, "Yep, I've been here before," and it is masterful and amazing to sort of recreate and relive that feeling that you get going off into this journey again. They start having dialogue back and forth, kind of filling each other out a little bit more. They ask how she got infected, and she says, like, I was in a mall, like the abandoned malls. Like, yeah, I broke in by myself. Tess mentions, like, you did that by yourself. You got a set of balls on you, kid. Um, and they started like thinking, just like, well, hold on. This is a young girl, 14-year-old in this situation. Somebody might be coming after you. She's like, is there a mom or a dad or a boyfriend that we need to worry about? I only mention that because it's important in the long game of The Last of Us. She initially says that she's an orphan in reference to the mom and dad part. And for the boyfriend, she just says no in a way that is going to be very telling as we go along with this story. I'm going to leave it there because we don't really get that much information about why that response was the way it was until a second game. But just to be aware, there's a little bit more information as to why Ellie would respond in the way she did with that no towards Tess. So, just like in the game, there's a long way and a short way. I take the long way because it's less dangerous than the short way. But in the long way, they get to a point where, just like in the game, it gets barricaded and they have to sort of prop Tess up to kind of go around and open up a door for Joel and Ellie. While that happens, Joel and Ellie have a little bit more time to connect. And she learns from where he's from, but Joel is being very dismissive of her questions. Like, nope, that's all the questions you're going to get from me. She asks if there are items. Like, I'm passing, pass, I pass. I'm not having this conversation. But in this, um, a note that is important is Ellie asks, how do you know how long an affected person stays alive? And he's like, well, I've seen it that they are alive for like a month, a couple weeks to a month, till some are around for 20 years. I don't know the rhyme or reason. All has to do with their biology and how they react to fungus, but that's sort of what it is. Tess eventually comes around, opens the door, and they get to a point where they look out on the world and see that there are tons. By continuing on this way, it will just be a death sentence because there are now what used to be very few infected, and a lot of them were underground, are now just crawling with them. Tess comes to the realization that we're so close to the QZ. A lot of people were heading this way, and then probably look for solace overnight in that building, and thus it sort of has now become overgrown with a bunch of infected together. They also learned that in this point is when they sort of put in the seeds that the infected act as a hive mind. They can call to the other and say, "Hey, if something is over here, you guys should all come here. This is where someone is." So they sort of work in tandem. This is sort of the first time we learned that as well. So they got to turn around and go the short way, which is a lot more dangerous. And they head through the museum. So, and I started smiling from ear to ear because this museum looks straight out of the game. The cabinets, the everything that's there, some of the things that to go around. It's like, oh yeah, this is it. We're in it. We're in it now. It also starts what feels like the most tense scenario this series has had so far. It is insanely well done again because less is more. When we do finally show the clickers, as opposed to always having an effect coming after, it's not a big action game. It's now these people are in danger. They're not as superhuman as they are in the game. So if they went through hordes and hordes of this, and then just healed up by taking some vitamins, it's going to feel a lot less fake. So they pull that off and make this a much more human approach. And boy, is it intense. For those of you who are not aware with the game, clickers are these sort of higher end version of the infected. They can't see anything; they can only hear sound. So it's a lot of like the Jurassic, the Velociraptors in a way where you're kind of just trying to be quiet, just don't say a word. And so there's a little bit of a quiet place feeling for it, where you're like, just get through this. They get to the museum um, and see that there are a couple of clickers there. First time Ellie has ever seen these that she's not aware of them. Joel has to explain to her, kind of miming it like they can't hear. I mean, they can't see, they only hear. And so she has to kind of like mellow her breathing, but it doesn't work. And then all through the races, they're getting attacked. Tess gets split from them. They have to go do their own thing. It's just, it's bedlam. They're running. Camera angles look great. This is a well done scene. The intensity level feels just like I would have felt when I first popped in. The very first time that I met the Clickers feels like the very first time that they are sort of being introduced to the world, and it works in droves. They managed to escape out of that, none for worse for the wear. Ellie does have a bite, but the bite's literally in the same spot that she was bitten in before. And she's like, well, if anybody's going to be bitten here, it's better me than anybody else because she can't get infected. A little bit of foreshadowing there, but for my gamers, we were already aware. But for the regular audience, that's what we call foreshadowing. Joel and Tess have a brief moment to kind of say, like, we got to keep pushing on. She has a bum leg, so they wrap it up a little bit. And she's like, nope, we just got to keep going. We got to do what's best for us and do what's best for the world, as it will. It seems like her tune has changed just a bit, where it used to be like me, let's do this for this. She does seem to be like, hey, there's a bigger end game for here. Let's get her to where we need to get her to. There's a reason for that. I think there's an important little beat that happens here is that as they head down this sort of like side ladder of this building, for the first time, Ellie looks out at the world, and Ellie, so I think, has the first time that Joel is reminded of his daughter because he's the last one up there on the ladder, but he quickly sort of glances at his watch and sort of gives a brief, hopeful smile, and then just pushes on. So this is the first time that I think he's had sort of any of that. However, Sarah used to make him feel, that's the first time he kind of got that in that moment. But they arrive at the drop off point where they're supposed to drop off Ellie, and it's quiet. Nothing's there. And then Joel approaches the truck that the Fireflies have, and it's empty, and there's blood leading into this building. They enter the building, and they see that the whole Firefly team has been wiped out. Their whole base camp is set up there, but they're all dead. And one of them has been bitten. So it's like something occurred where an attack took place where they killed one, then they just started killing each other. And so whoever they're supposed to drop them off to They're not there. And Tess is freaking out, like, all right, well, look, somebody's got to have a map. Somebody's got to have something that can tell us where she's supposed to go. She even asked, like, Ellie, did Marlene ever mention to you where you're supposed to go? Like, where? And she's like, she just said west. Okay, cool, west. They're trying to find a map. Long story less long. This is when the viewing audience for the first time learns that Tess has been lying and she was bitten in that museum fight. The gamers already knew that. And so she is kind of like, well, this is my last hurrah. She has not started turning yet, but she has a pretty gnarly bite on her neck. And this is going to be the end of the road for her. So where the series veers off a little bit from the game, the outcome is the same. Tess does sort of sacrifice herself to give Joel and Ellie a head start on the continuation of their journey while she stays back and takes the brunt of damage. She's got nothing to live for. She's going to die. And she doesn't want to obviously be one of the infected. In the game, it's the police. The military police are absconding upon this building and they're chasing after Joel and Ellie. It's not the case here. Here, they make it the infected. And so one of the infected that is in the room with them sort of attaches to the other fungus that's outside. Hence the reason why they told us that they're a hive mind. And they all wake up, rise up, and start coming towards this building. And so they hear the footsteps, they hear all the moaning. Joel opens the door and sees, like, oh crap, they're all coming. She was like, how many? All of them. They all coming. And it's at that point that Joel goes over to Tess and Tess says, save who you can. He has a brief moment where he looks at her and then he grabs Ellie and just books it out of there. And Ellie's freaking out, like, we can't leave her. But Tess has already made a decision and Joel knows that there's nothing else we can do for her. But there's a chance you do have some type of possibility of a cure. So at the very least, let's get you to where you need to get to. He books it out of there with her. And Tess is standing there with a lighter. Now, I've never in my life wanted a lighter to light more than I have in this scenario. It was intense and scary and sad because she's trying to do it to save her friend, trying to do it so she doesn't fully turn before she has no more control. There's a lot of emotions that are happening here. And then they're all running by her at first, and then all of a sudden they notice that she's there, and one of them tries to go assimilate her and basically has fungus go into the mouth. It's a bit uncomfortable to watch somebody try to kiss the other with fungus coming out of their mouth. But then Tess finally does get the ladder to come and drops it, and the place does explode. And then Joel and Ellie continue on for the next round of their adventures while the episode closes. I've been trying to wrap my brain about why they may have changed it being from the military to the fungus. One, maybe like let's not keep making the military the bad guy. I think they want to, as we go along, there's going to be layers to the police, and like Fedra and Fireflies and their different allegiances. I think we want to kind of curb that a little bit because there's going to come to a bigger head as we go along. Also, I think with the fun, you want to put a little bit more onus and fear on how together this infected can be. I also think it plays a little bit better. We have so far consistently said the police did this, the police did that, police are responsible for Sarah, police are responsible for this. You then start to kind of feel like you're just attacking one group of people. Like, let's spread all of this is bad. And so everybody's kind of fending for themselves. So in this, let's bring up the fact that the infected is as bad as it is, especially because we don't have the mechanics of the game where we're getting droves of them consistently at all times. We have not yet really seen the infected really come after them. We know when people get infected, they can't attack, but we had not seen it because at this point by the game, you would have been hit by a couple of hordes of infected and a couple of clickers at this point. You're doing it now to show the audience, the viewing audience who has not had the ability to play the game, to say, hey, this infected shit is real. And so it gives a little bit more weight to that versus we've already seen how bad the police or military part of this can be. A really strong episode. Like, I think this episode manages to do, it feels like a part one and part A because this is still the beginning, the building blocks of what is essentially building the relationship of Joel and Ellie. Like, that's what this whole series and this whole game is about. It's like two people who are lost. their world is lost, the world that they know. We will find out more about Ellie as we go along, but she's alone in this world, and so is Joel. And the two alone, lone walkers, now have to kind of get through everything together, and that's what this whole thing's about. So we have now just seen that the two of them, it used to be three of them, now they are officially just the two, and we're going to see how that relationship blossoms from sort of this point on. Strong episode. I do love this kind of using the prologues of every single episode to sort of tell us about the world before everything. It's important to note that the nuke that was bombed at the very beginning, while it wasn't in Indonesia, but it happens in the Boston area too. All cities sort of tried to do the bombing. It just was too little, too late. The fungus was moving too fast, and the bombing didn't work. But we see a scenario where they see where the bomb hit. It just didn't do anything. It's also why some of the buildings are damaged and why some things are toppled over. They just kind of tried to wipe stuff out. It just didn't work. Very powerful episode. I'm in love. Like I I have not replayed the original Last of Us in quite some time. I recently have done Last of Us 2 within the last couple of years, but I think it's as things start unfolding, things are starting to click back in. Like I'm starting to see images that I saw in the game when I played in the show as we go along. I'm like, oh yeah, nope, I know where this is going. I see what's happening next. And you get little fine things like the whole horde versus police changes or tweaks here and there, but for the most part, it's playing out the same way. What's going to be interesting is that the next episode, when we get to Bill and Frank, if you have not played sort of the expansion or the left behind part of it, uh, some of this will be new to folks. So some of the gaming folks will not have as much information as we have had for these first two. And from what I've heard, I've not seen it yet. From what I've heard, one of the best episodes of the season, which is saying a lot because I think these first two episodes were top tier. What did you guys think about this episode of Last of Us called Infected? If you leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name that's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.